cá e pra cá, a cá e cá pra cá, para.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Bem-vindos, bienvenidos. My name is Rad. I use they, them pronouns, and I am wearing a black and white striped t-shirt with lavender and light yellow sleeves. I am a mid-brown skin genderqueer person. There is a wall of art behind me. I'm a cultural worker building consciousness between healing justice, system change, re-indigenization, and queer futures. And I'm your host for Study into Action. Welcome to the third public session in our series. If you're using closed captions, you can click the pop-out widget button on the bottom left of art.coop below the live stream window. If you click that, you can go to a web page to view closed captions and adjust the size of the text. Thank you for choosing to be here. Thank you for all that you do and all that you are. Thank you for choosing to build relationships across culture and solidarity economies, for choosing to study, to act, to transform, to seed the next world together. We encourage everyone tuning in. If you haven't already, please watch session 1, where there is a full land and labor acknowledgement to ground the series. We acknowledge that we primarily live and work on occupied Lenapehoking.
Recording in progress.
The traditional land of the Lenape people, a center of trade for many of the first contact Native nations in the Northeast. We pay respect to our Shinnecock, Wampanoag, Haudenosaunee neighbors. We hold the contradictions that their lands and lifeways were decimated, their resources continually extracted to make life in this city possible. We pay respect to their elders, past and present, for their continued stewardship of the land, and we commit to fighting against harmful policies and actions that degrade these lands and waters. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. Colonization is an ongoing process. Corporate greed and federal policy push agendas to extract wealth from the earth, degrading sacred land in blatant disregard of treaty rights. Acknowledgement only becomes meaningful when coupled with authentic relationships, sustained commitment, and informed action. Beginning the long work towards repair and healing will lead to fulfilling our obligations and responsibilities as guests on these lands by following the proper Indigenous protocols and unsettling our colonized behaviors. As we talk about land and real estate, may we move with deep conscience and responsibility to the next 7 generations. Support your local land and water protectors. Today, we're going to hear about permanent real estate cooperatives and the arts. So let's get a sense of who's watching this live. Please share your name, pronouns, whose land you're on, and a few words about the energy you're bringing to this experience today. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. While this flows in, we want to thank Haystack Mountain School of Craft, who instigated Phase 1, and Open Collective Foundation, the home of the school for Phase 1 and 2. Study into Action is produced with support from grant makers in the arts and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, as well as funds from sending partners, Minneapolis College of Art and Design, the Joan Mitchell Foundation, Arizona State University, The Field, Drexel University, and the Guild of Future Architects. HowlRound Theater Commons is producing and distributing Phase 1 and supporting us with ASL and closed captioning. Thank you, HowlRound. We are incubating a cooperative model of study. We aim to become socially and financially self-determined and invite you to support us in this effort with gifts of time, money, art, or open source code. Any surplus from Phase 1 will support Phase 2 and 3 of our work. Our budget's completely transparent, and you can find it at opencollective.com/study-into-action. Make sure to also follow us along on Instagram and Twitter @_artcoop. And if you're creating, doodling, feeling inspired by what you hear during these sessions, we'd love to see your creations. Please share on social media and tag us @_artcoop. Excellent. What a group. We're here to build relationships, to connect cultural innovators across silos, popular educators, cultural organizers and creators, arts academics, economists, policymakers, technologists, and grant makers who are building the cultural economy we want. Again, as a reminder, if you're using closed captions, you can click the pop-out widget button to go to a different webpage to view the captions. And now I'm going to pass the mic on to the incredible Caroline Willard.
Hey, thank you, Rad. Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline Willard. I'm a co-organizer of Art.coop Study into Action. I'm a white woman with a lemon print shirt and short brown hair in an empty room. And yes, thank you so much for choosing to be here with us. Welcome back to everyone who joined us before, and welcome to those of you who are just tuning in for the first time. We invite you to visit art.coop to view the recording of session 1 and 2 from the last 2 Fridays. And if this whole thing is new to you and you want to dig in deeper, first, we welcome you and thank you for coming, and we encourage you to read the catalyst of this whole series, this big 120-page report, which also has a short video that Nati Linares and I wrote about culture and the solidarity economy, which is really just a synthesis of all these interviews we got to do with over 100 people, many of you who are in this chat right now. And we thank you so much for all that you do. It's time to study together and dream so we can move into action. Marina will put a link to the report in the chat. There's also a directory where you can add yourself. And as a reminder, this gathering, Study into Action, is happening because the interviewees in the report, those 100 or so of you, And all the people that emailed us kept asking us to hold space for these conversations about the cultural economy we want. But this is just a very small window into the worlds, as Nati reminded us last week, that so many people have envisioned and dreamed up across legacies and decades, and who are building right now. So use this as a small springboard to dig in and know there's so much work to do. There are so many people in this chat who are building the solidarity economy and culture, and we thank you for your work and for being present. We're building this together. Welcome. I'll pass it back to Rad now.
Thanks, Caroline. Oh, I hear y'all miss my bucket hat. I don't know where it went. I hope I find it. I miss it too. We're so excited to welcome back sonic alchemist and community catalyst Dreamy to open up this experience and set the vibes. Dreamy is a transnational, genre-bending, world fusion sonic alchemist, mindful movement and meditation guide, social justice activist, teaching artist, and conscious community catalyst. She's the founder of the NYC-based women's music, healing arts, and empowerment ecosystem, the Collective Bay. Learn more at www.collectivebay.com, at collective.bay on Instagram. Thank you, Dreamy, for opening up our space today. Don't forget to stay engaged with us in the chat while she goes in and takes us there. The Collective Bay.
Tuning in. Can y'all hear me? Tuning in live from Mohawk Land, Turtle Island. Tuning in whole heart, whole soul. Tuning in on time, in tune with all of creation. You are invited into a deep breath. You are invited into the full body presence. You are invited here and now. As we awaken to our fullness, as we awaken to our intention, our purpose, we use sound, vehicle for transformation, transmutation. We use sound, music, rhythms of our ancestors to remember what it is we have forgotten. We use sound, rhythms to dive deeper into the intelligence of this body. Intelligence that has been suppressed for far too long. We awaken this intelligence so we can engage in awakening a new reality. Can y'all hear me? Find your body, find your breath. Find the beat of your heart, rhythm of heartbeat. Indicator of your aliveness, of your power. Deep sigh of arrival. We welcome all versions of ourselves, all bodies, all forms, begotten in all ancestors that have been scattered across lands, diasporas, scattered across oceans, rivers, streams. We welcome all versions of ourselves that know how to treat each other with respect, with intelligence. We welcome all forms of intelligence, from our needs to the trees. We welcome all forms of information, wisdom, from whispers on winds to the deep breath that lives within. You are invited to awaken. And as you you find hips this morning, this AM, or wherever you have landed, allow their freedom. Allow the freedom of your joints, your limbs. For contained within them is liberation. Liberation not of this body, but of the collective body, earth body. We return to them. Can you feel them? Earth bodies, arise, awaken. We are sending out welcomings, not just to our own body, but to all bodies, bodies of birds, of bees, of trees. Habitats resilient that have reimagined themselves. Communities resilient that have reimagined themselves. We welcome them here. You are invited to stomp onto this earth. The same way our ancestors did, and those indigenous to these lands stomped on the earth, not out of disrespect, but to awaken seeds planted in the last harvest. These seeds do not know borders. Seeds do not know governments. They do not know what it is to vote on water. They receive your stomps. And just like that, repaired nations rise, ancestors rise, all bodies rise. Your dance is not just your liberation. I'll say it again. Your dance is not just your liberation. It is the liberation of the earth body. It is a reminder that you can be as free as winds that know no borders. As birds that belong to all trees. Remember, please remember. Call them in. Call them in. We are dancing off years of distrust, millennia of thievery, of destruction. We are dancing off centuries of inadequate governance, centuries of stolen land, of suppressed creative potential. Dance them off. Shake clear the fear. And root. Root here. Root now. They can hear you. Bless this land from the top of its head to the bottom of its feet. Bless the eyes of this land, for they witness cruelty and kindness in this land. Bless the ears of this land, for they hear cries of heartbreak and shouts of celebration in this land. Bless the mouth, lips, and speech of this land, for this land is a speaker, a singer, a keeper of all that happens here on this land. Bless the arms and the hands of this land, the bodies that carry these limbs, for they remake and restore beauty on this land. Ashe. Amin. We have arrived again.
Wowie, wah, wah. Ooh, that got my bones real deep. Thank you for the shout out to my homelands dreaming. Love the Brazilian music. Ashe. Wow. All right. I hope y'all are feeling as good in your body as I am. Show some love and energy in the chat for Dreamy. I know y'all already have. And without further ado, we'll transition to our incredible presenters, Greg Jackson and Janelle Orsi from the Sustainable Economies Law Center. I'll pass it off to Gregory to start us off.
Greetings, everyone. Happy to be here. My video chooses when it wants to work, but I'm definitely here with you all. I am an attorney at the Sustainable Economies Law Center. Been there since about 2018. Had the pleasure of working with the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative and Repaired Nations, among many other cooperative projects. So excited to bring that expertise here, along with my colleague Janelle, who I'll pass the mic to.
Hey friends, we're going to make a short video entrance and then Greg is going to share his screen. I'm Janelle Orsi. I'm a co-founder of Sustainable Economies Law Center. I'm a cartoonist, activist, lawyer, pretty obsessed with transitioning land back into the commons. And so you're going to see a little bit about our work in a second. And yeah, it looks like Greg is asking for access to share his screen. And then I'm going to, once that happens, turn off my video so we can see our interpreter. And thank you so much for having interpretation at this event. All right, I think we're good, right? I feel like you might need to spotlight the interpreter because I'm seeing Greg, just FYI. But anyway, so we can share the slides in the chat because the slides are full of resources and links, because we figured we can't do a whole lot in 30 minutes, but basically point you toward a lot of our favorite resources. So one thing is, so we're from Sustainable Economies Law Center. We have a lot of programs related to land and worker co-ops and finance. And so you can just click on a link there and there's a whole gallery of our projects. And so I'm going to be saying next slide a lot since Greg is controlling the slides. I might from time to time say something other than next slide just to keep it interesting. But, Greg was suggesting people power. But anyway, so we're part of Sustainable Economies Law Center, but really part of something much bigger. And we have links to several of the land projects that we're working with, just beautiful organizations. All of them are BIPOC-led groups who are actually getting title to land and really not just owning land, but transforming their relationship to it and to each other. And so you'll get a little bit of a taste of that. Greg, people power. AKA next slide. Okay, so yeah, we only have 30 minutes, and we were just like, what can we do in 30 minutes? And so we thought, well, we'll try to think of our best nuggets of wisdom, and then we will point you towards supplies that will help you craft your own land relationships. And so there's just tons of links in these slides for you to go back and play with. Next slide. And one of the things we wanted to say, and this is, we're lawyers and people are always like, hey, tell us how to form the structure. Like, should we be a limited equity housing cooperative or a land trust? And people really often, because it's easier, right, want to put things in boxes. And it's very tempting to do that and just to say, hey, here are your options and here are the steps to forming it. But the truth is, if we really want to transform things, next slide, whatever we're creating really shouldn't fit into any of the existing boxes. And there's no formula. It really depends on who you are, what your goals are, what your context is. And so try to disrupt the usual boxes. In fact, that's a good thing. And I love this phrase landcraft. I've never heard the phrase landcraft before. So someone else named this presentation and we were just going with it. But the truth is that what we really need to do is just harness our natural intuition, come together, be creative together, because that's really the way we're going to transform our relationships to land. Next slide. And this is legal advice. It doesn't sound like legal advice when I say it, but the things that feel right are the things that work best. And so you'll hear us say words potentially in this presentation such as love or relationships. And that is, in fact, the best way to legally protect land and our relationships to it. And on that note, next slide. What we're seeing, and I've been doing this work for 14 and a half years as a lawyer for land projects, intentional communities, radical real estate projects, whatever you want to call it. But something is actually happening now that feels like a paradigm shift, which is that groups are coming to us, so many groups, and they're getting access to land, but they're doing it in such a different way than I had seen before, like really setting aside this idea that land is a thing that can be owned and profited from. And they're groups of people, this is the trend that I've been seeing, is that they're stewarded by non-hierarchical collectives of people. But those collectives of people are not just insular groups trying to get land for themselves. They're really nested in these broader movements for transformation. And then, they see the land as a permanent community asset, not as a thing that they're going to trade in later to cash in. And that is it's evidence to me of a paradigm shift. And Gregory's going to take it for a bit and share how he's part of that shift and what he's learned.
Nice. Thank you, Janelle. So this is the first golden nugget or gold nugget wisdom truth thing that we're giving to you all today. Deliberate, you must. Say it in your best Yoda voice. And we're saying that because there's a lot of things that a collective group of people seeking to be a cooperative need to go through. Putting all of their ideas and consensus, or however you come to decision makings, together on paper. And so at times it can feel like we're being debilitated by deliberation, and it just can feel like a lot at times. So it's really important to know that we're going to have to discuss and figure out a lot of different things. And I often let people know that they should first be thinking about how do you make decisions? Like, have everyone be on board with that decision-making process first, and that can help relieve a lot of tensions or potential conflict down the road. In my opinion, the values, mission, and vision that you all set and come to an agreement on based on those decision-making processes are going to help you form everything else in the future. Janelle's going to talk about how the ingredients of these entities we're creating are much more important than the entity themselves. And in this point, we're just really wanting to let you all know that like this liberatory movement is beautiful, and it feels very empowering. There's a lot to do, so pace yourself. It's also very important to be clear and simple. I think that it's like love supreme, thinking of John Coltrane, so cue that one in your minds. And this is our first craft section where we're giving off some of the resources that we're familiar with or that we use on the day-to-day. So when you're coming back to this section, you can look through the decision-making processes, see a really good 4-minute video from YouTube on how sociocracy works, which is a decision-making and organizational structure that Sustainable Economies Law Center has used and adapted along with others. I also recommend a lot that folks check out the Decider app. It has explanations about like the different decision-making processes as well as like comparisons. So you'll be able to understand like, you know, what are the pros and cons of each and walk into those choices with the full understanding, or at least a fuller. The last thing I'll talk about in this column is the AMP-led co-op decision-making framework. They've created an open source version of the policies and bylaws that they've created for themselves. And they've done a super amazing job of plotting out like where decisions rest within a cooperative, which leads me into the next column, talking about structures, often seen through roles and job descriptions. It's really important to have clarity on this so everyone can move forward with like efficiency and trust of the other folks that are in the collective. And so you can find a bunch of stuff here, everything from worker self-directed nonprofits into cooperatives themselves. And lastly, like very important to have clarity about how conflict is engaged and transformed. So I included some links and documents here that will get you on the right track. Elinor Ostrom, like an economist that we'd like to reference at the Law Center, won a Nobel Prize for talking about like what are the best ways to steward collective resources, and like clarity is one of the top things she's mentioned. While you're going through all of this, you definitely want to keep it simple. You want to say what you mean when drafting, then ask if it could be simplified. And you want to do your best to create memorable organizational structures and mission, vision, values, etc. If it's like too complex to remember at least most of it, then I mean, it can work, but it may not serve the purpose or its full potentiality. And an example I like to think of is the mission statement for the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, which is awesome and impactful, and it says everything. And yeah, I've been involved with them for many years now, and I still can't quite remember it, which I don't know, you decide for yourself. It's important to balance structures for the now versus the future. And so some of us may be starting with 1 to 3 people, you know, having a small core group of folks before we eventually get to our larger vision. And so sometimes roles and job descriptions are held by many people with an intention of transitioning those out. So it's important to, you know what has to be done now, but also plan to have everything balance out. And I also believe that it's important to repeat what you've created out loud every so often, just reminding yourself like, yes, this is our vision, this is our values, so that those things can continue steering you forward. I feel like I'm going too slow, so I won't speed up because we're with the ASL, but I'll just keep it a little bit shorter. The next nugget, I believe that we got. And we say that because relationships are currency, and oftentimes cooperatives are greater than the sum of their parts. I mean, it's important that we tend to the things that are the strengths of the cooperative, and also be people-centered. And so firstly, take time to understand your team's background and context, because whether they want to admit it or not, the ways that they were raised or the experiences that they went through are gonna be brought into the job. Also personally invest in facilitation techniques and conflict engagement. It's gonna be useful in your personal life. You'll start noticing that you're facilitating family meetings and stuff and helping to get things done. It is way more beneficial than just in the job. This should have been first, but you have to understand yourself as a person coming into this cooperative, knowing what maybe sends you over the edge, takes you out of your comfort zone into your stretch zone, or maybe perhaps into your panic zone, and really be willing to question everything, and not just assume that we have the answers, we know everything, the other person's wrong. Jessica Gordon Nimhart expresses in her book, Collective Courage, how important pre-existing relationships are. And I think a lot of us shy away from the corporate context because of the fact that, they diminish that and they try and turn us into robots. So it's important that we don't do that to ourselves and become petty bourgeoisie or petty capitalists. And it's also important to learn how to, it's important to learn and practice compassionate candor and just telling people what needs to be said. Because if we leave things unsaid, elephants in the room, things swept under the rug, it comes to a point where we can't avoid it anymore, and it's usually way worse. So, do things while they're small, as the Tao would say. We really got to transform this situation we find ourselves in, because none of this will really work if we don't have a complete paradigm shift. And I think we all know that, but I'm just we just felt necessary to state that there are political, economic, social, ecological, and geographic intersectionalities that are going to be different for each place. And so Oakland is different than San Francisco, which is different than Humboldt, and Sacramento, which is different than Nevada, and I don't know, Delaware, New York, whatever. Everyone's going to have to approach this thing differently, on the micro scale when creating their own cooperative, but also in terms of how do we transform this macro thing and make sure that the oppression and exploitation that is the hallmark of capitalism doesn't continue to disrupt and extract what we're creating. We really have to address the power dynamics that continue to keep us here. And we also have to be aware of the prisoner's dilemma. That the classic case is a police person brings two folks in and plays them against each other, trying to get one to tell on the other. When folks are split up and you don't know what the other is doing, it's always tempting to do what's in our best interest without forefronting the group's best interest. And yeah, we got to push through that and be able to trust each other, to not make that selfish choice, but make the collective choice. At this point, I'll pass it over to Janelle.
Thank you so much, Greg. So these little golden nuggets or nuggets of wisdom are also meant to be somewhat provocative statements just to get us thinking. And part of the title of this presentation being about permanent real estate cooperatives is, yeah, I know a lot of folks are here to learn about cooperatives, and cooperatives are not a thing. It means kind of a couple things to me. One is they're not the thing. What I see a lot happening lately is that people are forming cooperatives or calling things cooperatives and sort of feeling like they've arrived, that simply being a cooperative is the transformation, but it has to go so much deeper than that. And then cooperatives are not just one thing, and that's why I drew this elephant cartoon here to really say it sort of depends on where you're standing and what you're going for. Like, a lot of people think of a cooperative as a type of legal entity. For others, it's a tax category. For others, it's a state of mind. I mean, it really means a lot of different things. And so trying to define what a cooperative is not really a goal here. And I feel like there's some deeper principles that we can focus on instead that I'll share just briefly and then point you to some resources. So I use this image of cake, a cartoon of cake, because at a practical level, we do have to form organizations. We do at the state level need to form some probably kind of corporation, and pick what type. And then at the federal level, we have to choose a tax status. And these are actually two different things that tend to get really muddled together. And I separate them out as the entity is the spongy part of the cake, and then the tax status you choose is really, it's the icing on the cake. You choose it for the sake of getting a particular type of benefit. And then there's all kinds of ways of mixing and matching, and it varies from state to state. And so there's not really a way to really roadmap, here's what you should form. But one of the things I like to say is just don't overthink it, because what matters is the ingredients of the cake. It's the financial, governance, operational policies that you bake into the cake. That's what gives it its real flavor. And so, yeah, it's the ingredients that matter. That's what makes something a so-called land trust or a permanent real estate cooperative. That's not a legal type of entity exactly. It's simply something it's a label that we put on a certain combination of ingredients, and where to fold those ingredients in. It can be your bylaws or articles, these very important sounding legal documents, and it's important to do some of that there, but it can go, down to the level or, spread to the level of culture or how you relate to each other, how you communicate with each other. Like these are all really critical ingredients, and you can bake them in so many different ways. Next slide. And so, yeah, if the entity and the tax stuff don't matter so much, then what are the key ingredients? And over the years, there's 3 principles or key ingredients that at Sustainable Economies Law Center, we just keep coming back to these 3 over and over again, and feel like if we can just sort of focus on baking these in, that it creates really powerful organizations. And so asking about your organization, how does it spread power? How does it spread wealth? And then how do you make sure that that wealth and power stays deeply rooted in the community and doesn't get swallowed up by a big corporation that comes and buys everything? Next slide. And this is a slide I created to kind of share where I think our transformation is moving, and why I think the combination of spreading power and spreading wealth, it creates some kind of infinite impact that I think conventional cooperatives really don't necessarily do. Like in many ways, yes, cooperatives spread power to the people involved, but they may or may not have broader system transformation in mind. They could just be an insular group of people, not necessarily looking at the broader social context we're in, not necessarily trying to spread wealth beyond the cooperative. And, the dominant model of charities or nonprofits, maybe you could say it's about spreading wealth, but it tends to be in a very hierarchical, top-down, paternalistic way. It's not spreading power. It's, giving people things that they may need, but not the power to meet those needs in the long term. But when you combine these 2 things, spreading power, spreading wealth, it's almost like we need another name for it. And I like using the phrase movement cooperatives, they're groups of people who are coming together to meet their own needs and organize in their communities for their own benefit, but they know that their own benefit is tied to the greater good and the broader system transformation. And so they're not just insular, they're very outward oriented. And that many of the clients we work with, I would describe them as movement cooperatives, whether or not they are in fact a nonprofit or a cooperative corporation or something else. It's this combination of things that makes them so powerful. And then the next slide are just some of the craft supplies that I want to offer up. We've written some articles about how we've seen these different principles take shape. There's links to a very long slideshow, actually, that has a lot of resources on what we call radical real estate, including even, for example, 22 practices to spread power. If you were to click on that, it's a series of slides that are policies or practices that you could even adopt, and they're written very concisely. You can adopt them and preferably adapt them, because I think none of these things should be adopted wholesale. It's really something that you can craft, and so we're just offering these as craft supplies. So yeah, those links. And then I will say one of the pivotal considerations, you can go to the 501c3 slide, is, I was saying a lot of these considerations don't matter, but this is in fact one of the decisions that is pivotal, whether to be a 501c3 or not, because that does shape a lot of things in terms of what benefits you're going to be able to access. And there's some links to slides and a handout that kind of compares 501c3s to other entities, and then talks about some of the hidden benefits of C3s, because we know that C3s can get donations and grants a lot more easily than other kinds of entities, but there's a lot of other things like the ability to have unpaid volunteers without worrying about employment law, the ability to get loan repayment if you have a lot of school debt. And so sometimes these are in fact the pivotal decision points. But the thing I want to say about 501c3s, because it tends to conjure up fears of the nonprofit industrial complex, is they're quite flexible. And so Sustainable Economies Law Center is a 501c3, but we're structured like a worker collective. And you can really democratize 501c3s. And we've created a network I should have linked to called the Nonprofit Democracy Network. And there is a shift in the nonprofit sector toward more cooperative and democratic models. So yeah, next provocative statement. I love how you read my mind, Greg, and just advance the slides when you know I'm about to shift. It's pretty good. Land is not a thing, and I mean this quite seriously, and it's kind of insightful once you start to think about it. Next slide is, I feel like I always thought of land as a thing. It's like a square, right? Like we divide it up into squares, and the land, I thought intuitively, it's the stuff that's on the land, right? It's the dirt, it's the trees, everything that's encompassed in that square. Next slide. But when I started to think about it, and also just really spending time with clients and starting to understand how they relate to land, next slide, I realized land is so much more than a square and the things that are on it. It's really everyone that has any kind of a relationship to that land, whether it's the fish that swim through it and the people who visited it. And what is the nature of that relationship? And just breaking it down a little more, it's one of giving and receiving. It's one of reciprocity, because there's the people and the creatures that help nurture the land. That's an inherent part of the land, whether those folks are on the land all the time or not. And then those folks are nurtured by the land and dependent on the land. And so to think that land is a square, a thing that you can box up and sell, without considering that whole web of relationships, it's so out of touch with the reality of the nature of existence. And so trying to rethink, well, then what is land? Next slide. Well, there's just many relationships that we have to think about protecting. And so as lawyers, we think about what are the legal tools we can use to protect this web of relationships? And then it's like, okay, well, how can we use leases and licenses and easements and purchase options to make sure that all of the beings that have relationships with the land can sustain those in the long term and not have them be severed? And this is an example of a map that we drew for just one client. And it's a piece of land that's very important to a lot of people. There's people living on it. It's a historic tribal village. There's many organizations involved in helping steward it. And when we started to look at what are all these relationships and then how do we protect them legally, it looks complicated, but it really is a beautiful thing. Like we're basically using easements and leases and co-ownership to make sure that everyone is able to sustain their relationship to the land in the long term. And you could do something similar with a piece of land that you are connected to, which is kind of map out what are all these relationships and then ask yourself, how do we want to protect them? Next slide. So there's some links to think about those legal tools I mentioned. Next slide. And the other thing is that each relationship could link to another web of relationships. So land is not just a web of relationships, it's a web of webs, because let's say a cooperative owns the land, then the whole web of relationships built around that particular cooperative is really critical to protecting the land. So And then you can go back to the slides on cooperatives to get a sense of how to protect the web of webs. And then it goes even deeper. It's a web of webs, because think about like EB-PREC, East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. They are a cooperative that's also building relationships to other organizations to make sure the land they own will be protected in the long term if the cooperative ever disappears. And so next slide, all these relationships, it sounds like a lot of paperwork. And one thing I wanted to say is it doesn't have to be all these long-winded, wordy legal documents. And it's really time to start innovating in how we document and craft these relationships. And so the next set of craft supplies is just inspiration for how you can create legal documents using images or cartoons. And we've done a lot of cartoon legal documents, but there's probably so many other ways. Once we did a 3-dimensional legal document in a group event, just to kind of think outside the box. Next slide. But yeah, there's the law, which is a really annoying system that we're working with at the moment. And the next slide links out to various resources about all the various limitations we have on how we can create land relationships. So we can have our imaginations run wild, next slide, but then find out that, well, maybe we can't be that creative because institutional lenders, they want to be able to put land back into the box and sell it if you don't pay off your loan. And so it limits our creativity in a lot of ways. And there's various other considerations like property tax and zoning. And so next slide is just even more links to learn about land and the law. And next slide is just a note that, big picture land, it's so hard to get away from thinking about it as a commodity. And the moment you own it, it can feel like you have this valuable asset that you can sell. And I think it's so important to build in permanent protections to that land from day one. Because if you don't do it at the beginning, and let's say the land starts to appreciate in value, trying to put protections on it later is like trying to stuff toothpaste back into the tube. And so the next slide is just a few resources on how you can build those permanent protections in from day one. And I will pass it back to Greg to tack on a few thoughts and talk a little bit about money.
All right, so we got about 5 minutes left. I think we're relatively on time. The thing I wanted to talk about with this slide is that when we think about permanent, it's often like separating the land from the structures and ensuring that like there is some kind of entity, whether that's a CLT, Community Land Trust, or a permanent real estate cooperative, that can make sure that the ownership of that land and the ability to keep it permanently affordable doesn't pass back into the hands of profit-hungry capitalist vultures. And so on the right side is just a little diagram of the way typically in like a really simple cooperative, how things flow in terms of there's a group of members that elect the board of directors on a 1-member, 1-vote basis, as opposed to what you'll find in conventional corporations where it's based on the amount of shares that you own. Those board of directors have the ability to select and supervise the general manager, who then selects and supervises the management, who then makes sure that the work gets done, benefiting the members, and that's the virtuous circle. So permanent real estate cooperatives are often putting that cooperative in the place of the CLT down at the bottom of the land, often because nonprofits legally have to be 51% disinterested. And so the folks that have a stake in it can't really like run stuff, which is not cool for me. Just a little bit about like nature, thinking about land as more than what Janelle talked about, like a box. There's this growing movement of rights of nature where they're basically like a corporation is considered a legal person because of crazy court precedents. Well, now like that same thing is happening for like rivers and trees and mountains and things like that, which is really important. And like acknowledging that, yes, there is something here, like a living being that has to be protected. money costs money. It's stupid, but that's like the world that we live in. Unfortunately, cash rules everything around me, but if you need to get dollar bills, I know a lot of folks are trying to do it with other people's money. And so often we're looking at foundation grants, donor advised funds. The skills that you pick up, like trying to pitch your projects in those spaces, can be moved over into other spaces where you can ask for a guarantor to help guarantee a loan if the banks don't think that you have enough experience or operations or whatever. It will also like lead into what you're telling members when you're asking them to buy in, or equity investors. There's a special way that you can do that here in California. The Seed Commons is a national financial cooperative loan fund network that has like technical assistance providers across the country. Tap in, there's probably one in your area or one close by, and there's non-extractive lending available. And then there's also program-related investments, CDFIs, and credit unions that you can look at. There are investment exemptions that you'll need to be familiar with if you are seeking equity investors or loans from people that you know. So be sure to consult, think outside the box, consult a lawyer in your area so that they can help you not get in trouble with the feds. Janelle, I'll pass it over to you to close it out.
Oh, Gregory, you just said be sure to consult a lawyer, and then you bummed everybody out. That is a problem. This is the last point.
I know, but just as a point, if we are giving legal advice, be sure that the money you're raising won't get you in trouble. That's all I'm saying.
That is very good advice. That is, taking people's money is one of the big legal pitfalls. But yeah, you can go to the slide that says lawyers are not a thing. This is my hope for the future, really, is I just think the legal profession as it has unfolded, yes, it's ridiculous. It's not responsive to the needs of communities and societies. We really need to rethink it. And yes, in the meantime, we have this legal system, and you all probably, if you're doing anything with land, should have a lawyer that you work with. And this question, can we write love letters instead of legal documents? You have no idea how serious I am when I say that. And when I write legal documents, I really am thinking about the fact that if we do not create more loving relationships with each other and between people and land, then none of this will work. And so, please think about getting beyond the usual framework of what lawyers are going to suggest you do with legal documents, and be crafty with it. Next slide. Like I said, we create a lot of our legal documents as slideshows, and we think of it as kind of a palette, a canvas on which to design our future. We're telling the story of our collective future together. And the role of lawyers, and this is how I've come to see my role, and hopefully how many lawyers will come to see their role, is we're not on a pedestal with some special expertise. We're not service providers providing services to a movement. We're part of it. And sometimes I remind myself that these land projects are not my clients. They are I'm their clients. I'm learning from them. They're creating the world that's going to sustain and nurture me and give me hope. And so expect, or try to create an expectation that any lawyer you work with really be a part of a larger whole of people deliberating together and designing together. And the last slide that you just saw was just several cartoons and articles I've put together and that others have put together to really just help us rethink the role of lawyers and our overall relationship to law, and really put the law back into the hands of the people. And that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Wow. Mind blown everywhere. How about you? Whoa, learned so much while healing my relationship with money. Thank you, Greg and Janelle, for that amazing presentation. Wow. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for our third session of Study into Action. We look forward to learning together in public over the next 2 Fridays. Yes, we continue our series next Friday, September 24th at the same time, 12 p.m. Eastern, with Solidarity Grant Making and Investing. Case studies in solidarity grant making and investing to support grant makers in deepening their commitment to systems change, cultural restoration, and land back. Enjoy the weekend, everyone, and let's build the culture we deserve. Thank you again to Chris, Francisco, Nati, Caroline, Marina, Shruti, Rhett, Vijay, and Emma, and Dreamy. Bye, y'all.